It only takes a few seconds for literally thousands of tons of steel to stop following the tracks. And when that happens, everything changes. These 5 train derailments caught on camera are going to prove just that. The Castleton catastrophe, oil, grain, and a bad radio.
Yep.
So roughly 154th. Okay. And you said that it's...
Starting things off in the freezing cold of North Dakota. In 2013, if you stood near the small town of Castleton, you'd have witnessed a massive BNSF train hauling grain cutting through the snowy lands. But here's the real deal. It all came down to a single damaged axle on a grain car. This small piece of metal couldn't handle the weight, and it broke. This failure caused the grain train to get out of control and derail, but the disaster didn't stop there. Due to this, many cars spilled over onto the track beside it. This was the westbound line. Now, when it comes to railroading, it's a straight-up nightmare. In the case of Castleton, a second BNSF train was coming, and guess what? It was transporting crude oil. What could have possibly happened with 106 tank cars that were filled with highly flammable Bakken oil? The answer is simple. It was a disaster. The oil train moved along, and for a second, it seemed like everything was just fine, until you saw the wreckage of the grain sitting right in the middle of the path, like a huge wall made of steel. The oil train literally smashes into it at 42 miles per hour. There was no brake fast enough to load that heavy. It was like trying to stop a mountain. The train slid across the snow. The cars got crumpled just like soda cans, just before the real nightmare took place. You see, the train wasn't empty. It was holding 476,000 gallons of crude oil, which was spilled out. It was immediately ignited, and there was something more than just fire. An entire mushroom cloud inferno could be seen from space, along with a series of explosions that followed. This derailment sent flames hundreds of feet into the air and forced nearly the entire town of Castleton to evacuate. The communication breakdown. The investigation into this mess revealed something that was honestly hard to believe. The reason the oil train didn't stop in time was due to a radio issue. The crew on the oil train was on a whole other radio frequency than the original train crew. Imagine, on the other side of the radio, there was grain screaming into their mics about derailment, but the oil crew literally had no idea. They had zero warning until they saw the wreckage with their own eyes. This disaster was extremely sad because not only did it cost lives, but it also cost a lot of money. This derailment resulted in over $7 million in property damage, and that doesn't even touch the massive costs of cleaning up the contaminated soil and water. It was such a high-profile mess that it forced the U.S. Department of Transportation to pass new laws regarding the DOT 117 tank cars having thicker shells and better resistance to heat. This is the perfect example of how one broken axle and a mismatched radio could ruin an entire industry's laws. The Harvard tornado, a single tornado versus the machine. Now let's get to another strange incident at Harvard, Illinois. Usually when a tornado hits, people get worried about their roofs or cars. No one really expected a storm to go after a Union Pacific freight train, but that's exactly what happened here. You see, the tornado struck, and it was technically a weak EF0 tornado, which means the winds were likely under 85 miles per hour. So how on earth did something like this flip a train? Well, think of it this way. A freight car, which is basically a giant hollow metal box. When an EF0 tornado hits a house, it tears off its entire roof. The wind didn't need to be extremely strong in order to destroy. It just needed the right angle and the right amount of pressure on one side. As the gust pushed harder and harder, the force built up against the broad surface of the car to the extent that the car lost its balance. And just like that, it tipped past its center of gravity, and there was no saving it at this point. At first, the cars in the middle of the train started leaning slightly, but then they kept leaning, and within a few seconds, they fell over one another. They dragged metal, and it sparked across the tracks. But the chaos didn't stop there. The rear portion of the train didn't immediately come to a stop. The brakes weren't fully locked up across the entire line yet, so the back half kept rolling forward under its own momentum. Then it moved straight into the derailed cars ahead and crashed right onto steel. The impact? Too bad. One of the tank cars was punctured, and it released harmful material. Due to this, Nearby civilians had to evacuate while crews rushed in to save everyone. This makes you feel like a scene that fell straight out of Final Destination. All it took was wind hitting the wrong surface at the wrong moment. The real shocker is what happens next. And if you think this was intense, you won't believe what else Mother Nature can do. Subscribe to find out. The Amarillo switch, the $5 million mistake. If you want to talk about how a simple human error can cause a catastrophe, look at Amarillo, Texas, in October 2006. This wasn't a storm or a mechanical failure. This was just a guy with a job to do who made one tiny mistake that led to a massive pile of scrap metal. Approached a siding, which is a side track where trains park to let others pass. They saw something that made their hearts drop. The siding was already filled with 53 freight cars, but as they got closer, they realized the switch was set to the siding. The tracks were funneling them directly into the back of the parked cars. The engineer slammed on the emergency brakes, but you have to understand the momentum of 128 cars full of coal. A fully loaded coal train can weigh over 15,000 tons. They hit the parked cars at 32 miles per hour. In the video, you can see the trailing engine and 17 coal cars just fly off the tracks like they're made of plastic. The kinetic energy was so massive that it crushed the parked cars and sent coal flying everywhere. Who was to blame? The brakeman of the local train? He was supposed to reset the switch to the main track after he had finished moving cars earlier that day. He simply forgot. The investigation found that the conductor, engineer, and dispatcher all shared the blame for not verifying the switch position. Interestingly, the coal train's engine, number 5942, was so badly damaged that they thought it was totaled, but BNSF actually rebuilt it and put it back to work. That's a testament to how tough these engines are built. The Kismet last-second disaster. Next, we go to Kismet, California, in June 2006. This one is a case of awful timing mixed with a missed signal. Two Burlington Northern freight trains were heading toward each other near a siding. The northbound train, BNSF 4479, had the priority, meaning the signals told them they had a clear path and the other train would wait in the siding. As they rounded a corner, the crew saw the headlights of the southbound train. At first, they probably thought, no big deal, they're just waiting for us. But as they got closer, they realized the other train was still moving. The blue screen of death. The footage from the northbound train is terrifying. You see the signal? It's green. Then at the absolute last second, literally as the front of the train is passing the signal post, the light flicks to red. The trains collided head-on at about 22 miles per hour. The reason the light changed so late? The southbound train had rolled over its own stop signal only moments before, which triggered the computer to turn the other side red. If you look closely at the footage right before the impact, you can see the engineer of the southbound train jumping out of the cab. He literally leaped for his life seconds before the metal started crunching. The camera immediately cuts to a blue screen upon impact, but the audio keeps recording. You can hear the sounds of thousands of tons of steel grinding and snapping. It's a stark reminder that in the rail world, close doesn't count. Both trains suffered catastrophic damage, all because one crew missed a single stop indication, Aurora's drifting light rail. Finally, let's look at something more modern, a light rail accident in Aurora, Colorado from September 2022. Light rail is usually seen as the safer, slower cousin of the heavy freight trains, but physics doesn't care what you're hauling. This accident happened at the intersection of Exposition Avenue and Sable Boulevard. The train was supposed to take a sharp turn at 10 miles per hour, but as the police footage shows, the operator was clearly in a hurry. The train came around the bend at 39 miles per hour. That is nearly 4 times the speed limit for that specific curve. When a light rail train hits a curve that fast, the centrifugal force is greater than the friction holding the wheels to the rail. It split in two. The front 2 cars separated and went sliding across the asphalt like a car on ice, while the back 2 cars derailed and stayed on the gravel. There were 24 passengers on board. Imagine sitting on your way to work, looking at your phone, and suddenly the train is sliding down the middle of a city street. Miraculously, nobody was killed. 3 people were taken to the hospital with injuries, but none were life-threatening. The operator was immediately fired and a massive corrective action plan was put in place to install automatic speed braking systems on those curves. It's a classic case of human overconfidence, thinking you can push a machine past its physical limits until those limits push back. The bottom line: when you look at these 5 wrecks, you see a pattern. Whether it's a tornado in Illinois, a bad radio frequency in North Dakota, or a speeding driver in Colorado, these disasters almost always come down to a breakdown in communication or a single moment of human error. Trains are some of the most efficient machines ever built by man, but they are also some of the most unforgiving. There is no swerve in a train. There is no quick stop. Once those thousands of tons of steel lose their grip on the rails, you are no longer a driver. You are just a passenger on a very expensive, very dangerous ride. These videos serve as a permanent record of what happens when the Iron Highway fails. They are used by safety investigators and new trainees to ensure that the mistakes made in Castleton, Amarillo, and Kismet never happen again. After all, in this industry, the price of a mistake isn't just a fine, it's millions of dollars and lives on the line. What are your thoughts about these 5 derailments caught on camera? We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below.